Welcome to the Terror Time.
First story is about the phantom train of Hallows End. There's a stretch of railroad outside the small town of Hallows End that no one dares to cross after sunset. The locals call it the Phantom Line, a name that has gained infamy on Reddit horror stories threads and analog horror podcasts. The stories claim that once a year on Halloween night, a ghostly train appears, carrying the souls of those who vanished without a trace. This eerie tale has circulated for decades, but no one truly believed it until last Halloween. It was a cool October evening when three friends, Ethan, Melissa, and Jake, set out to investigate the legend. They had been following true scary stories and spooky paranormal investigations on Midnight Horror Station, and they were eager to experience something for themselves. Armed with cameras and audio equipment, they planned to document their night and perhaps debunk the tale of the phantom train. The old tracks were rusted and overgrown, long abandoned by the town. As they approached, the air felt unnaturally heavy, as though the atmosphere itself was warning them to turn back. "This feels off," Melissa whispered, her voice barely audible over the eerie Halloween sounds of the wind rustling through the trees. "Relax, it's just an old ghost story," Ethan said, trying to mask his own unease. "We'll catch some spooky footage and call it a night." They set up their equipment near an old signal tower and waited. The horror ambience surrounding them grew thicker with each passing minute, the night creeping in with an oppressive silence. Jake checked the time on his phone. Midnight was approaching. "Any sign of the train?" Melissa asked nervously, glancing at the tracks. "Not yet," Jake replied, adjusting his camera to focus on the distance. As the clock struck 12, the first sign of the paranormal nightmare began. A distant whistle echoed through the night, growing louder with each passing second. The sound was haunting, like something out of a cosmic horror tale. The three friends exchanged worried glances. "Did you hear that?" Ethan asked, bravado crumbling. Before anyone could answer, the temperature plummeted. The once mild autumn air now felt freezing, and a thick fog rolled in, obscuring the tracks. Jake turned on his camera, hoping to capture some horror-found footage. The lens struggled to focus as the fog thickened. Suddenly, lights appeared in the distance. Dim at first, but growing brighter. The ground began to tremble as the unmistakable sound of a train's engine filled the air. But this train wasn't like any they had seen before. It was old, impossibly old, with decayed carriages and cracked windows. It barreled down the tracks at an impossible speed, heading straight for them. "Get out of the way," Melissa screamed, but her feet wouldn't move. It was as if the ground had glued them in place, forcing them to watch as the train grew closer. The train's horn blared, deafening them as it passed through the signal tower. But instead of crashing, the train phased through it like a ghost, its form flickering in and out of existence. Inside the carriages, they could see shadowy figures, passengers, or perhaps something far worse. Their faces were blank, their eyes hollow, and they stared directly at the group as the train sped by. Jake's camera continued rolling, capturing every terrifying second. The train passed in an instant, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind an unsettling silence. The fog lifted and the air warmed slightly, but the three friends stood frozen in place, unable to process what had just happened. Was that real?" Melissa stammered, her voice trembling. Jake checked the footage. The train was there, clear as day, but the passengers, those eerie figures staring back at them, sent a chill down his spine. "It's real," he muttered, unable to tear his eyes away from the screen. "We need to get out of here." They packed up their equipment and made their way back to town. The night wasn't done with them yet. As they drove along the empty highway, the same whistle echoed in the distance. "No way," Ethan whispered, gripping the steering wheel tighter. The lights appeared again, this time in their rearview mirror. The phantom train was following them. "Faster!" Melissa shouted, her voice rising in panic. Ethan floored the gas pedal, but the train kept pace, its horn blaring in their ears. Just when they thought they were done for, the train vanished, disappearing into the fog as mysteriously as it had appeared. The group returned to town, shaken but alive. They uploaded their footage to the Midnight Horror Station, where it quickly went viral. Viewers analyzed every second, confirming the terrifying reality of the phantom train. But the story doesn't end there. In the weeks that followed, the three friends began experiencing strange occurrences. Ethan reported hearing the train's whistle late at night, even when he was miles from the tracks. Melissa suffered from vivid nightmares where she was trapped on the train, surrounded by those hollow-eyed passengers. Jake's camera, the one that had captured the footage, mysteriously vanished, only to reappear with new, distorted clips that no one had filmed. The legend of the phantom train grew stronger, fueled by their experience. The train, it seemed, wasn't just a ghost story. It was real, and it wasn't done with them yet. To this day, on Halloween night, the whistle of the phantom train can still be heard echoing through Hollow's End. Some say it's searching for new passengers. Others believe it's a warning to stay away from the cursed track. But one thing is certain: once you've seen the phantom train, it never truly leaves you. The second story is about the last ride of the Midnight Express. The Midnight Express was no ordinary train. For years, urban legends claimed that once a year, on Halloween night, a train would appear on an abandoned railway, offering passengers a one-way ticket to their worst nightmares. The spooky tale gained attention on scary Reddit stories and analog horror reaction videos, drawing thrill seekers to the desolate tracks in hopes of seeing it for themselves. This past Halloween, Daniel, Lucy, and Alex decided to investigate the legend. As avid fans of horror recaps and scary true stories, they believed the Midnight Express was just another exaggerated ghost story. But they were wrong. On Halloween night, they made their way to the old train depot, which had been abandoned for decades. Tracks were rusted and the air was thick with an unsettling horror ambient. Lucy shivered as the eerie Halloween sounds of the wind howled through the cracks in the depot walls. "This place is creepy," she muttered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. "Exactly why we're here," Daniel said with a grin, eager to catch some footage for their horror found footage project. "Imagine if we actually see the Midnight Express. This could be our big break." Alex adjusted his camera, already filming the desolate scene. "Yeah, if we don't end up in some paranormal nightmare." They waited as the night dragged on, the silence of the old depot amplifying their anxiety. As midnight approached, the air grew colder, and the Halloween soundtrack Daniel had been playing on his phone was suddenly drowned out by an ominous sound. A low rumble, distant at first but growing louder. "Do you hear that?" Lucy asked, her eyes widening in fear. Before anyone could answer, a bright light appeared at the far end of the tracks. The ground trembled as the unmistakable sound of a train engine roared through the night. The Midnight Express had arrived. The train screeched to a stop in front of them, its black iron exterior gleaming in the moonlight. It looked old, far older than any train they'd ever seen. Its windows were dark, and the doors slid open with a groan, beckoning them inside. "No way," Alex whispered, capturing the moment on camera. "Is this really happening?" Daniel, ever the skeptic, stepped forward. "It's probably just an old train someone restored. Let's check it out." Lucy hesitated, her gut telling her to stay away, but the pull of the Midnight Express was too strong. Together, they boarded the train, the door slamming shut behind them with a deafening clang. The interior was even more unsettling. Seats were worn and the air was thick with dust, as if no one had set foot on the train in decades. "Let's get some footage and get out of here," Lucy whispered, her voice shaking. But as they ventured deeper into the train, strange things began to happen. The lights flickered, and a cold draft swept through the carriage. Alex's camera malfunctioned, showing static before cutting out entirely. "Something's wrong," he muttered, trying to fix it. Suddenly, the train lurched forward, throwing them off balance. "What the hell?" Daniel shouted, grabbing onto a nearby seat for support. "Who's driving this thing?" The train picked up speed, hurtling down the tracks at an impossible rate. The windows rattled and the lights dimmed, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. "We need to get off," Lucy screamed, but the doors were locked tight. Panic set in as the Midnight Express plunged into darkness, the sound of the engine roaring in their ears. Outside the windows, the landscape had changed. No longer were they passing through the forest, they were surrounded by a desolate, otherworldly wasteland. It was as if the train had crossed into another realm, a place where the rules of reality no longer applied. "We're not in the real world anymore." Alex whispered, voice trembling. This is something else. Something wrong. The temperature dropped even further, and the air grew heavy, making it hard to breathe. Daniel felt a sense of dread wash over him, like sleep paralysis gripping him while awake. This can't be happening, he muttered, his bravado finally cracking. The train plunged deeper into the unknown, but then that's when they saw it. Figures, dark and shadowy, sitting in the empty seats around them. At first, they were faint, barely noticeable. But as the train sped on, the figures grew clearer. They were passengers, but their faces were distorted, their eyes hollow, and their bodies twisted in unnatural ways. It was as if they were stuck in a perpetual state of suffering, bound to the Midnight Express for eternity. Lucy's scream pierced the air as one of the figures turned its head toward her, its lifeless eyes locking onto hers. "We need to get off this train," she cried, frantically pulling at the door, but it wouldn't budge. The sound of the engine grew louder, deafening, as the train hurtled toward its final destination. The passengers, those ghostly figures, began to rise from their seats, their bodies moving in jerky, unnatural motions. They reached out toward the group, their fingers long and bony, their mouths open in silent screams. "Do something!" Alex shouted, but there was nothing they could do. The train had taken control, and there was no escaping its grasp. Suddenly, the train screeched to a halt. Doors slid open, and outside was nothing but darkness. The figures disappeared, fading into the shadows as if they had never been there. Without a second thought, the group bolted off the train, stumbling onto the cold, hard ground. The Midnight Express roared to life again, speeding off into the night, disappearing into the same eerie fog it had emerged from. The third and last story is about the haunted tracks of Bloodstone Pass. Bloodstone Pass was infamous for its haunted railway, a place where trains disappeared and passengers were never seen again. The legend had been circulating for decades, gaining notoriety through analog horror scary videos, Reddit threads, and horror movie recaps. Locals warned against going near the tracks, especially on Halloween night, when the spirits of those lost supposedly returned to claim new victim. This Halloween, 4 friends, Sam, Mia, Tyler, and Jenna, decided to investigate the spooky legend. As fans of paranormal investigations and scary true stories, they were intrigued by the haunted tracks. They gathered their equipment, including cameras to capture horror found footage, and a few Halloween-themed items like a Halloween witch pot and some decorations to make their adventure feel more festive. They arrived at the site just after sunset. Air was thick with an unsettling, scary ambience, and the distant sound of an approaching train echoed in the wind. "This place gives me the creeps," Mia muttered as they approached the rusted track. Tyler grinned, holding up his camera. "That's why we're here. Imagine if we capture something paranormal tonight. We could be famous." The group set up near an old, abandoned train station at the edge of Bloodstone Pass. The station, like the tracks, had been deserted for years, its walls covered in graffiti, windows shattered. It was the perfect setting for a ghost story, and the eerie Halloween sounds of the wind rattling through the broken glass only added to the atmosphere. As they waited, they discussed the legend. According to the locals, a train full of passengers vanished on these tracks decades ago. Every Halloween, the ghosts of that lost train reappear, searching for new souls to take with them into the afterlife. The story had gained popularity in paranormal nightmare circles, and even appeared on Midnight Horror Station as a top spooky tale. Sam checked his watch. Midnight's coming up. This is when the train's supposed to appear. Jenna, who had been unusually quiet, spoke up. "Do you guys really think we're going to see something tonight? Or is this just another overblown ghost story?" Before anyone could answer, the air grew unnaturally cold. The Halloween soundtrack playing from Tyler's phone suddenly distorted, cheerful tunes twisting into something eerie. "What the hell?" he muttered, turning off the music. Thick fog began to roll in, blanketing the tracks and station in a ghostly white mist. Temperature plummeted, and their breath fogged the air. "This isn't normal," Mia whispered, clutching her jacket tighter. "Something's happening." Suddenly, a low, rumbling sound echoed through the fog. First it seemed distant, but it grew louder, closer. The ground began to tremble beneath their feet. "That's a train," Sam said, his voice barely above a whisper. The sound of a train whistle pierced the air, but the tracks remained empty. The group exchanged nervous glances as the fog thickened, obscuring everything around them. Tyler pointed his camera toward the tracks, hoping to catch some horror found footage. Then, out of the mist, lights appeared. Dim at first, but growing brighter as the rumbling intensified. "Coming," Jenna muttered, her eyes wide with fear. Through the fog, a massive black train emerged. But something was wrong. The train looked old, impossibly old, its carriages covered in rust and decay. Its windows were shattered, and its form flickered as if it were phasing in and out of existence. It was the ghost train of Bloodstone Pass. The train screeched to a halt in front of them, its horn blaring in their ears. The doors didn't open. Instead, shadowy figures appeared inside the carriages, passengers, or perhaps their ghosts, staring blankly out at the group. Their eyes were hollow, and their faces twisted in eternal pain. "What is this?" Mia whispered, backing away in terror. Sam, too terrified to move, could only watch as the train began to shift. The fog swirled around it, and the passengers inside became clearer. They reached out, their hands pressing against the shattered windows as if trying to escape, or worse, trying to pull someone in. Tyler stepped closer, his camera still rolling. "We need to get this on tape," he shouted over the noise of the train. But the closer he got, the more distorted the footage became. The screen flickered with static, and strange sounds filled the air. Whispers, unintelligible but terrifying. The Halloween ASMR noises of the wind had been replaced by ghostly voices that seemed to surround them. Suddenly, the train's horn blared again, and the doors creaked open. The group froze in place as a dark figure stepped out. It was tall and cloaked in shadows, its face obscured by the fog. The figure raised a hand, beckoning them to come closer. "Don't move," Jenna whispered, her voice shaking. "Whatever that is, it's not human." But Sam, hypnotized by the figure, began walking toward the train. "Sam, no," Mia screamed, grabbing his arm, but it was too late. The figure reached out, its hand cold as ice, and touched Sam's shoulder. In an instant, the world around them changed. Fog lifted, and they were no longer standing by the tracks. They were inside the train. The passengers surrounded them now, their faces inches away, their hollow eyes staring into their souls. The train lurched forward, and the doors slammed shut. The ghost train had claimed its victim. The group was trapped inside the haunted carriages. Outside world fading away as the train sped through a desolate, otherworldly landscape. Figures of the passengers closed in, their twisted hands reaching out, their mouths opening in silent screams. Tyler's camera recorded everything, the footage glitching and flickering as the nightmare unfolded. Mia screamed as one of the figures grabbed her arm, pulling her into the darkness. Jenna and Sam tried to fight, but there was no escape. The train had taken them. As the ghost train hurtled toward its final destination, the sounds of Halloween night, howling wind, rustling leaves, distant bells, faded into the background. The only sound left was the relentless rumble of the train on the tracks, carrying its doomed passengers into eternity. By morning, tracks at Bloodstone Pass were empty again. The train and its passengers vanished without a trace. The only evidence left behind was Tyler's camera, lying on the ground by the abandoned station. When the footage was recovered, it revealed nothing but static, except for a brief, haunting image of shadowy figures moving in the fog. The legend of Bloodstone Pass lived on, growing darker with each retelling. Every Halloween night, thrill seekers ventured to the haunted tracks, hoping to catch a glimpse of the ghost train. But the truth was far more terrifying than any ghost story. Once you board the train, there's no getting off. And that brings us to the end of our 3 disturbing true train horror stories on Halloween. From ghost trains to haunted passengers, these terrifying tales remind us that some journeys are better left untaken. If these stories gave you chills, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe for more bone-chilling content, and share your own haunted train stories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and remember, if you ever find yourself on a lonely set of tracks this Halloween, be careful which train you board. You might never come back. Happy Halloween.